I'm here where they're searching for little Gus Lamont yet again. Many people are asking the same question. Why have they resumed the search now? Either way, the push to find Gus is back on, and slowly but surely, the details of Gus's family are being pulled into the spotlight. It's understood that Josh only found out that his son was missing after police woke him up at his Belayley North farmhouse hours after Gus had gone missing. Did police get new information, or did senior commanders call off the search too soon? I'm Carly Smith, senior reporter for Daily Mail, and I'm here where they're searching for little Gus Lamont yet again. The search was called off more than a week ago after Gus vanished from the front yard of his grandparents Josie and Shannon Murray, where he was playing in the sandpit around 5 p.m. on September 27. But now, as of Tuesday, the search is back on. Behind me, around 80 Army personnel and several police officers have resumed the search on this sheep station called Oak Park. They're combing very difficult terrain out here. As you can see, there's some salt bush and some scrub, but out there it is largely featureless. There are a few hills and a bit of scrubland, but there's not much else. Oak Park Station is around 320 kilometres from Adelaide in South Australia's mid-north. The search radius for little Gus has now almost doubled. When it began, it was around 2 kilometres from the homestead. Now it's about 5 kilometres. Oak Park Station is around 45 kilometres from the Barrier Highway, which is the nearest major road. The track is rough and it has so far damaged several vehicles coming out to either cover the story or attend the search. Just yesterday we were told that a couple of Army personnel trucks managed to actually get separated from the rest of their convoy because the sand that is kicked up by all these vehicles is so thick that they actually lost touch with each other for a little while. Many people are asking the same question. Why have they resumed the search now? Did police get new information, or did senior commanders call off the search too soon? Either way, the push to find Gus is back on, and slowly but surely, the details of Gus's family are being pulled into the spotlight. Gus's devastated family remain stoic and are cooperating with the police investigation.
You can imagine just how they're feeling, without having Gus and without having answers as to exactly where Gus is and what's happened to him. This would be traumatic for any family.
It's understood that Shannon and Josie inherited Oak Park Station from Shannon's side of the family. Her father, Vincent, was a World War II hero who was a prisoner of war on the Thai-Burma Railway, and her mother was Claire. Grandparent Josie also happens to be transgender. Josie, who was formerly known as Robert, appeared to begin her gender transition after the death of Vincent Pfeiffer, Shannon's father. The town has been accepting of her choice, according to a Yumta source who I spoke to recently. It is unclear if Josie and Shannon's marriage is still intact after her transition, but they do still live together here at the homestead. The family is incredibly private and actually took them 6 whole days to release a photo of little Gus after he went missing, which they were criticised for on social media. Gus's mother Jessica, whose own long blonde curly hair is very similar to that of her son's, also lives here on the homestead together with her 1-year-old son Ronnie. Gus's father, Joshua Lamont, lives separately to the family and does not live here on the station. Instead, he lives in Belayley North near Jamestown, which is around a 2-hour drive away. Joshua is said to have a commuter relationship with his partner Jess. We understand that he travels between his home in Belayley North and the homestead here, but the word among sources in the region that are close with Joshua say that he doesn't quite get on with his parent-in-law, Josie. It's understood that Josh only found out that his son was missing after police woke him up at his Belayley North farmhouse hours after Gus had gone missing. I spoke to Gus's grandparent Josie last week, who said, "We're still looking for him. You can't help. We are still dealing with this." Around 5:30 p.m. on September 27, Gus's grandmother came outside to find him missing from the sandpit that he'd been playing with out the front of the homestead. With the sun starting to sink, concern quickly turned to panic. For the next 3 hours, the family frantically searched around the homestead and the property. They were shouting Gus's name into the twilight, but soon enough they realised they needed to call the police. A major search ensued, involving police, helicopters, drones, and even police diving squads who searched the the local dams. For a week, investigators scoured the massive Oak Park station, which is around 150,000 acres of sheep farming land. Every morning, convoys of trucks negotiated the 43-kilometre drive, bringing visitors from the outskirts of the windswept local town, Yunta, which boasts 2 petrol stations, a pub, a post office and a police station. It has an official population of around 60. They would then scour the rocky landscape, salt bushes and creek beds that all combine to make it all too easy for a small child like Gus to disappear. A footprint found after 3 days is the nearest police have come to finding out what happened to Gus, and even that footprint may have been discounted by police since then. Police said it showed a very similar boot pattern to the pair he'd been wearing, along with a blue long-sleeved Minions t-shirt and a grey sun hat. Yet an Aboriginal tracker concluded that it could have been there for a week before the night Gus went missing. In the absence of any further footprints, the trail went dead. No further leads have emerged, and police have admitted that this is more of a recovery operation than a rescue operation. The focus has been on locating remains, and now the search is back on. For now, we don't know if the little boy in the blue Minions t-shirt will ever be found. In a sick twist, psychics are exploiting the disappearance of a 4-year-old boy by posting videos on social media claiming to use their gifts to find the missing child. Meanwhile, a false claim featuring an AI-generated image, which was shared more than 24,000 times on social media, alleged eyewitnesses had seen a boy matching Gus's description with a man. So where is little Gus? While dingoes, a wild dog here in Australia, have been blamed in the past for disappearances of small children, that is extremely unlikely in this case. There are precious few in the land around Yunta, since sheep farmers tend to shoot them on sight. The region is also protected by a 1,600-mile dog fence designed to safeguard livestock. Crocodiles, which inhabit the north of Australia, are not found in the south. Gus is too big to have been taken by an eagle, and if he was found by a wild pig, there almost certainly would have been evidence of a struggle. Police divers have searched every pond and water tank in the area, although some think Gus may have fallen into a well or a mine, but none have been found within several miles of the property. There are precious few naturally occurring sources of food out here, which is why experts think it's very unlikely that a little boy would have been able to survive this long in the outback. So while the mystery of Gus Lamont's disappearance is yet to be solved, chances are that the little boy who was wearing a Minions t-shirt with his adorable curly blonde hair will be found safe and well are fading each and every day.
Four-year-old Augustus Gus Lamont was last seen playing in a sandpit at Oak Park Station. A month now sits close on the calendar. What follows is a clear, human account of the facts we know, the troubling gaps investigators face, and the lines of inquiry that now matter most. This is not a catalog of rumors. It is a careful examination of the features, timelines, and unanswered questions that could still point the way to truth. Gus disappeared from Oak Park Station on September 27th, the day that anchors everything else. A child at play is the pivot of this whole story. The location is familiar, the activity ordinary, and yet the outcome was anything but. The family says Gus was playing in sand near the homestead in the late afternoon. In a place where people know the land intimately, someone's absence is usually noticed quickly. That moment, a small, everyday scene, is the only sure signpost we have. Investigators have spent weeks trying to reconstruct what happened in the minutes and hours that followed. Who moved where, which gates were checked, which vehicles were out, and precisely when the alarm shifted from household worry to multi-agency emergency response. As the 1-month mark approaches, that last certain moment grows weightier. Every question now folds back into it. Did Gus wander? Was he taken? Did something happen on the property that no one yet understands? The answers to those questions will come from two places: what the land yields under careful re-examination, and what the people close to the scene can produce in corroborated, time-stamped detail. One urgent line of inquiry is the role of wildlife, and here the evidence points away from simple animal explanations. Local trackers, volunteers, and people familiar with the property have said that dingoes and other large predators are not present in numbers or behavior around Oak Park Station to make them likely culprits. Fence lines and stock management, as described by locals, reduce the chance of a roaming pack being on the homestead at that time. Large raptors and predators that are sometimes offered as quick explanations have physical limits. They rarely, if ever, take human children in a way that would leave no trace. Animal attacks typically leave torn clothing, blood, drag marks, or other disturbance. The absence of such signs is a crucial empirical fact. Whatever happened did not leave the pattern of an ordinary wildlife incident. That doesn't rule out an animal entirely in a theoretical sense, but it makes that hypothesis far less probable and shifts real investigative focus toward human activity and the sequences that surround it. Another troubling detail concerns the father, Joshua, who reportedly learned of his son's disappearance only after police woke him. That account raises practical questions investigators must pursue. Where was he? Who informed him? And what are the precise timestamps that mark his awareness? In any missing person inquiry, the moment a close relative moves from being unaware to aware is a key piece of the timeline. It fixes windows in which events must be placed. If the father indeed only learned after police visited, that interaction itself becomes reportable. Who called whom, what was said, and how was the decision
Two
made
different
to follow
witnesses,
local authority.
two completely different stories, and one 4-year-old boy who vanished without a trace.
Were closed, which vehicles were on the road that evening, and which homes might have seen something. Investigators are obliged to collect and cross-check phone logs, messages, and movements to peg down a reliable chronology, and the father's late awareness is one of those chronological anchors that detectives will keep returning to. The last person publicly identified as having seen Gus was his grandmother, Shannon Murray, who said she last saw him playing in the sand at about 5 p.m. Her account is central. The last seen witness in any disappearance is a pivot for reconstructing the scene. Investigators rightly treat such eyewitness accounts with respect and technical scrutiny because human memory is fallible and because even small uncertainties, which sand mound, which side of the yard, how long before the call, change the set of places search teams should treat as priorities. Shannon's recollection, when matched with physical inspection of the scene, could validate or refute possible paths a child might have taken in those last minutes. That makes re-examining everything around where she says she saw him, the footprints, the sand, the direction of sun and shadow, even the position of toys, a high-value task for any team trying to understand what happened. Investigators working the file have been operating on 3 emergent assumptions, cautious, but stark in their implications. First, given elapsed time and environmental conditions, the possibility that Gus is deceased is treated seriously. This is a clinical observation about probabilities given exposure, remote terrain, and lack of evidence. It is not a conclusion, but rather an operational lens that shapes which resources and forensic approaches are prioritized. Second, foul play is treated as a probable explanation worth focused inquiry. When landscape searches return no convincing trace and animal explanations appear unlikely, detectives reasonably move toward human agency as the most testable hypothesis. Third, if human involvement is probable, then the priority is identifying any person who could have been present, left the property, or been in contact with the homestead during the critical timeframe. Those are difficult, sobering assumptions, yet they translate into specific investigative tasks. Canvass anyone who was in the area, evaluate all vehicle movements, and examine all social and interpersonal dynamics around the family and the station. To turn those assumptions into concrete leads, 5 homestead features stand out and must be scrutinized with forensic care. The sand mounds where children play, the small secondary structure on the property and who was there, the family meal and its timing and participants, the reservoir or water storage points, and the nearby wooded or thicker scrub area. Each of these features is a potential node of evidence. Sand mounds can hide a dropped clothing item or a fresh scuff. A small building might contain a footprint or a discarded item. Mealtimes reveal who was present and who might have left the table. A reservoir is an obvious hazard for a wandering child, and the wooded pocket is the one place the eye expects to find something that plain fields do not reveal. Re-examining these 5 elements, not as casual glances, but with measured, documented forensic steps, is the practical roadmap for any team that hopes to turn absence into presence, that is, to find the one physical trace that reorients an investigation. Within that mapping, ambiguity over exactly which sand mound Gus was playing on and the observation of fresh sand take on outsized importance. If there are multiple sand mounds, their relative positions to the homestead, their elevation, and their exposure to wind matter. Fresh sand in a wind-blown environment stands out. It can mean recent human activity or shifted earth that would preserve impressions temporarily. Investigators need to record which mound was described, catalog the grain and compaction of sand across mounds, and compare any impressions with footwear samples. The goal is not to read too much into a single observation, but to treat it as one slice of physical evidence that, when considered with witness timelines, may narrow where search teams should intensify. Equally, the second smallest structure on the property, a modest outbuilding, raises operational questions. Who occupied that structure at the relevant time? What function did it serve? And what movements of people in and out of it can be substantiated? Is there a bed, a mattress, or storage that might hold clothing or items that pass unnoticed? Are the doors and windows intact? Do they bear fingerprints? And was anyone seen entering or leaving around the critical hours? Clarifying the occupants and their roles, whether they were family, contractors, visitors, or transient workers, is essential. Every adult who had legitimate reason to be within earshot or sight of the homestead at that time becomes a person of interest to be interviewed, not accused. One of the hardest facts in the field work is what is not there: the total absence of clothing, no clear evidence of a struggle, and no scent trail that trackers could reliably follow. Those negative findings are as informative as positive ones. In outdoor disappearances, an absent trail undermines the accidental wandering hypothesis. A small child leaves scattered, chaotic traces as they move through scrub and sand. Similarly, an animal attack generally leaves physical marks that can be traced. When the environment produces neither, investigators must account for scenarios that allow for removal without trace, or for human action that concealed or carried away the evidence. That reality, no clothing, no sign of struggle, pushes police to examine human presence and movement in a more granular way. Who had the physical ability to move a child, what vehicles could carry a child unnoticed, and who within canvassed populations had interactions around the window of time in question. Which brings us to the local community. Yentah, a small settlement of roughly 60 people, stands within practical reach of investigators canvassing for alibis. In a tight-knit community of that size, movements and visitors are noticed. Residents will remember vehicles, new faces, or unusual activity. Canvassing Yentah exhaustively is both feasible and potentially decisive. IDs of people who left town at a certain time, dashcam footage from passing vehicles, or eyewitness memories of a person carrying a child could all become crucial. Investigators must therefore work methodically through that community, offering assurance, handling information with sensitivity, and tracking even the smallest corroboration. In small towns, a single recollection from an otherwise anonymous resident can pivot an inquiry from stale to active. Before you draw dramatic conclusions, a cautionary takeaway: absence of evidence must be treated carefully. It is tempting, in the face of silence from the land and the terror of a missing child, to fill gaps with narrative. But as investigators and as a public, we must resist easy storytelling. The responsible path is to preserve evidence, interview thoroughly, and let corroborated, time-stamped materials guide conclusions. That said, given the facts on the ground and the lack of convincing animal or accidental explanations, the investigative priority should be to treat human involvement as the most promising hypothesis and to pursue it with rigor and resources. What this means practically for investigators is clear. Treat Shannon's last seen account as pivotal. Map precisely which sand mound she pointed to, photograph it from multiple angles, record any residual sand compaction, and cross-reference that with movement patterns described by others. Re-examine the second structure with a clean team and forensic oversight. Revisit the mealtime sequence with fresh, time-stamped questions. Check the reservoir's edges again for scuffs or dragged vegetation, and carry out a thorough, respectful canvass of Yentah, interviewing residents in a methodical, recorded way that prioritizes corroboration over rumor. Each of these steps is plain, earnest detective work, slow, repetitive, and emotionally taxing, but exactly what this case requires. What to hold on to? This case is heart-aching in its detail and relentless in its gaps. Treat the absence of evidence cautiously, but don't let caution become passivity. The balance for investigators is to prioritize human hypotheses while still exhaustively testing every alternative. The last seen witness, Shannon, is the central pivot, and a focused re-examination of sand mounds, the small structure, meal times, reservoir edges, and nearby wooded patches could still produce decisive leads. Canvassing Yenta's small population is practical and may reveal corroborating details that have simply not been connected yet. Above all, insist on verifiable information, timestamps, footage, physical items properly documented and forensically analyzed. If you have anything of that kind, bring it to the police. Do not circulate speculation. It distracts, it wounds, and it siphons resources from the painstaking work that actually solves cases. Stay persistent, keep the facts at the center, and keep Gus's name alive through method, not myth. If you want ongoing updates as investigators re-examine the scene and the timelines, hit subscribe and turn on the bell, not to amplify rumor, but to follow the verified information that can bring this family closer to answers.